I wanted to tell you about my little claim to fame. I am the daughter of a minor character from the show South Park. Some of you may know from the Comedy Central channel in the 90s. My father was the inspiration for the character Angry Ned, Ned Gerblansky. He had a voice box and one arm. I will, when I share this, I'll share it with a photo. So my father met the guys that wrote the South Park show because he lived in South Park. It's actually called Fairplay, Colorado. He moved there when I was about 5. And I would like to tell you the story of how my father came to be semi-famous on this show and how he came to be in Fairplay. It's kind of a long story. Okay. My father was born in California in 1948, and he was born the day before his mother turned 18. She had met a sailor, an older man, and they got married in Yuma, Arizona. And shortly after my father was born, this man disappeared, ran off. I've recently found out that he had several other families, but that's another story for another day. My grandmother went on to get remarried to another military man, this time a Marine, whose wife had died and left him with a son also. So they adopted each other's children and moved to Washington State. After my grandfather was, after he retired from the Marines, he became a construction worker, which was his family business. Actually, my step-grandfather, step-adoptive grandfather. So they lived supposedly quite happily for some time. When my father was about 4 or 5, he had a broken neck from falling off the couch. There were skin problems. There were mental health problems throughout his childhood, according to his medical records. And apparently he had a troubled high school career as well. So shortly before he turned 18, he ran away to live with his grandmother, my great-grandmother, and that was his mom's mom, and she lived still in California. And he lived with her for about 6 months, and then he decided to join up, go to Vietnam, be a soldier. So that's what he did. He went to basic training, and he had a lot of problems while he was there, and was in and out of the medical tent for little things that people don't normally go to medical for, like a scraped fingernail. He was shipped to Vietnam on 7 October 1967, and he was shipped back 40 days later after claiming to have jungle fever, and then he later said that was pneumonia. He was given a psych eval in Provo, Utah the day he shipped back in November of 1967. The psych eval clearly shows that he did not see combat and that he had psychological problems and physical problems that predated his Army career. But they didn't want to get rid of him, I guess. So they just kept him on base until his 3 years were up. During his 3-year enlistment, he had 46 medical calls. None of them were for anything that was serious. A lot of them were drug seeking. I have a transcript of that record that I can add to the comments. When my dad's enlistment was over, he went off the map. He told me at some point that he was a carny and a biker for a while, and he came up with the name Black Bart for his biker name. He was hitchhiking through Colorado Springs in the early 1980s, and my mom picked him up, and that's how they met. So along I came. I guess they started living together very quickly, and I was conceived within 6 months of their marriage. When I was about 1.5 years, my mom asked my father for a divorce. He had been working as a trucker, and he was working as a civilian custodian at Fort Carson for a while. She asked him for a divorce after it was about a year and a half. And so he had already tried to get Social Security or disability or VA benefits or something. And she said that she would swear to the fact that he said he would do anything to get those VA benefits. But up until that point, he had not. When she asked him for a divorce, he grabbed a gun and he went out into the street in Colorado Springs, and he proceeded to have a 3-hour standoff with Colorado Springs SWAT, holding a .357 to his chest, threatening to kill himself because my mom was trying to leave him and take me away from him. And finally, they got her to talk him down and take him to Cedar Springs, where he was admitted. He was transferred to Fort Lyon in Los Animas, where he received about 8 months of intensive therapy. And during that time, there are notes of this. He manipulated and triangulated the doctors and abused the nurses every chance he got. He did absolutely no actual treatment whatsoever, and he spent that entire time obsessing about my mother and me. He was released in May of 1985. The first thing he did was go to get custody, visitation, whatever he could get through the court. The court awarded him unsupervised weekend visitation, and the first weekend was in July of 1985. And I came back from that visit a totally different little girl, disheveled and filthy. Couldn't tell my mom a single thing that had happened. I was almost 3, and I was fully potty trained, but after that I started having accidents. My mom knew something was wrong, so when it became apparent that I was not able to go back to my regular schedule and I was having too many problems, she took me to the doctor. And even after 10 days, the doctor found evidence of tearing that could have only been caused by an adult male. It's very apparent that there were no other adult males that had access to me at that time. And I have body memories, even though I don't have a visual memory. Every single time I've been around my father ever since, I have felt the same terror and the same feelings that I must have felt that weekend, not knowing where my mom was or why my father was doing these things to me. So that's the story of what my dad did to me. And a few months later, he was granted VA disability for PTSD that he says he received while he did a tour in Vietnam. And he moved to Fairplay, where he proceeded to buy thousands of books, swords, knives, sickles, scythes, guns, and other weapon type objects. He's a collector of these things. And he proceeded to groom the entire town. He told them all that he had been taken to trial for molesting me, which was partially true. He was taken to a joke trial in family court. All the expert witnesses that testified said that there was evidence that I had been abused physically, psychologically, emotionally. It was very clear that I had been abused and that I had verbally stated and restated that it was my father who had abused me and raped me. And because Department of Human Services did not endorse the expert witness list, my father's case was dropped on a technicality. And he used that. He told everyone that so that they would think he was totally transparent, and that he was being railroaded by an angry ex-wife with a grudge. So he moved there, and he became the Wizard of Fairplay, the Rev Michael Smith, Black Bart, and now he goes to Dragonfest and the Witches' Ball and Burrow Days and all the other local and semi-local festivals and tries to find other victims. So there is that part of the story. And I've recently come into some documents that I didn't know existed regarding his Vietnam service and the fact that he lied to every single military personnel that he could It's all on paper, just nobody ever looked. So I went ahead and reported him to the Office of the Inspector General, the VA, the Colorado Attorney General, the media, and everyone else I can think of. And so far, nobody seems to care. But this man has defrauded the US government and the US taxpayers out of tens of thousands of dollars. He told me that he was receiving over $900 a month in disability benefits from the VA while he spent my whole life abusing me because he was still allowed to have access to me because he was acquitted. And the story just goes on. It doesn't even end there. There's so much more to it, and I want to share that. It's a lot. But the last piece of it is that after my dad moved to Fairplay, after he started living up there in South Park, some of the kids that he met, some of the kids that he invited to smoke pot at his house, which was very frequent, he did that all the time with the teenagers. I've heard that from multiple people. I've got witness statements to that. He invited Trey Parker and Matt Stone to come and smoke pot with him as well, and he started telling them stories that he made up of Vietnam. That he had a little Vietnamese girl that was his gopher, to go fetch and carry things for him, and that she had had one arm blown off about here by a landmine or a grenade or something. And so that's why they made Ned Gerblansky in South Park the show with one arm. And my father's got a gravelly voice, kind of like mine, much deeper. And so from smoking. And so they made him with a voice box to simulate the gravelly tone in his voice. And so that's my little claim to fame, that my dad is Angry Ned, and it's absolutely the most ridiculous show. It's dumb. It's so dumb, and the fact that these guys were so taken in by my dad, like, the whole thing is ridiculous. They were groomed just like everybody else. He took them in, he fooled them just like he fooled everyone else, like he fooled everyone at Park County DHS, just like he fooled Judge Groom, just like he fooled Gail Meinster, who is now a judge in Jefferson County. All the other people that I tried to get to listen to me. Kim Castellano was the manager of the Park County Department of Human Services at that time. No one would listen to me. No one would believe me about the things that were going on later with my family after, because it wasn't just me. I'm just one of at least 3 family members that he abused. And as far as I know, he's still out there trying to find other victims and stalking people. And so I just want to get this information out there and share it. And hopefully somebody that cares will see this message and know that what happened to me was not okay. What happened to me, what my dad did to me was not okay, but what the system did to me was not okay. Because they not only did they let my dad go, but they also messed with my mom really hard, and they messed with me, and they pretty much just wrecked my life. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm able to talk about it without completely falling apart. So if something is happening to you, if you're a victim and you're being victimized further by the system, please don't be afraid to speak out and say something, because the more of us that say something, the more of us former foster youth that speak out about what happens to us when we're in foster care, the more we can make a change. And so that's my message. I want to make a change. I want to bring some of this stuff out into the light, talk about it, talk about what happens to kids, talk about how they have no choices and how adults can do pretty much anything they want, and the kids just have to go along with it. Thanks for listening.